Hello everyone, welcome to EduTap and welcome to another session of Perspective 360 degree where we are going to do current affair based answer writing practice in a detailed and structured manner. And as a part of this video, as you would be knowing that we are going to begin with economic survey. So we know that economic survey has been announced. So basically whatever we are going to cover as a part of this series is going to be a descriptive point of view. It is going to be from descriptive point of view, and this is going to be part 1 of economic survey. So I'm going to bring part 2, part 3 also. So I will try to cover this entire economic survey within 4 parts. So that's how we are going to do it. And as a part of today's session, we are going to basically focus upon this chapter, which is chapter number 1. All the chapters are not equally important for your exam, so we are going to do them in a selective manner, whatever is required as far as this survey is concerned. From the descriptive paper we will cover it, right? So this is going to be the agenda for today. Now if you do not know about perspective 360 degree, let me tell you that here we do answer writing practice, and once the session is done you have to write the answer to this expected question in the comment box, right? And it is also going to get evaluated by our team free of cost. Now let us go through the expected question for today, the answer of which we are going to discuss in this session based on the economic survey. So despite a challenging global environment, the Indian economy has maintained strong growth momentum in financial year 26. Analyze the demand and supply side factors of this growth and discuss how ongoing structural reforms are expected to elevate India's potential GDP. This is question number 1, and we are going to discuss it as a part of this session. Then we have question number 2 also, which is the global economic landscape is increasingly characterized by fragility, diverging macroeconomic policies, and the rapid resurgence of economic statecraft. Discuss the key vulnerabilities in the global economy and how geopolitical factors are reshaping global policy. So this is the second question that of course we are going to discuss. But what is going to be a homework question? This one is going to be homework, right? That you are going to write in the chat box, and not the chat box but the comment box, and the PDF of the same you can download from our Telegram channel. Now let us begin. And let us see the first part of the answer, which is nothing but the introduction. So the question is regarding the fact that the global environment is getting changed. But if we talk about the Indian economy, up to a huge extent, Indian economy has maintained strong growth, right? And we have to analyze the demand and supply factors with respect to that. So based upon that, we can write the introduction that according to first advanced estimates as highlighted in the economic survey. So basically these first advanced estimates, these are the yearly projections that are there. Yearly projections, and these projections basically represent that how the economy is going to perform, how this economy is going to grow in a certain financial year, right? And who releases these first advanced estimates? They have been released by Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, right? And the data has been largely used as a part of the economic survey also, right? This data. So if you talk about the first advanced estimates, the Indian economy is charting a robust growth path with a real GDP projected at 7.4% and the gross value addition at 7.3%. Now this expansion is notable because it is largely anchored by internal macroeconomic fundamentals rather than external demand, and officially reaffirming India's resilience amidst global uncertainties. Now I'm not explaining these things because of course we are going to talk about all these factors, all these parameters in a detailed manner when we are going to see the body part, right? But this is going to be the snapshot of your answer, a brief introduction that how you're going to start it depending upon the question, right? I've already given you the question. Now if I talk about this chapter, which is the first chapter of the economic survey, which is state of the economy pushing the growth frontiers. Now this chapter basically put some light on two type of factors. The first factor is basically the global trends that are there. Secondly, it also talks about the domestic trends. Now first of all, what we are going to discuss, we are going to talk about the domestic trends that are there in context to of course India, right? And after that we are going to put some light upon the global trends also, although this global trend is lesser important as compared to the domestic trend, but still we are going to see it, right? We are going to see it so that you get a better clarity. Now let us talk about this trends in the domestic economy. And when I say trend in the domestic economy, as I've told you that as per the first advanced estimates, the real GDP growth is projected to be 7.4% for the financial year 26, right? And let me tell you that this 7.4% GDP that is being projected, the primary driver behind this huge growth, right, is going to be what? It is going to be demand side factors, because the demand is highly increasing as a part of the Indian economy. But apart from that, of course, we have the supply side factors also. But the economic survey says that the demand side factors have played a very important role. Now, what are those demand side factors or the demand side drivers when it comes to this projection of 7.4%, right? This real GDP growth of 7.4%. Let us first go through that. After that, of course, we are going to see the supply side factors also. So when I talk about demand side factors, the trend in the domestic economy from the demand side, the first and the foremost is the private final consumption expenditure, which is PFCE. Now let me tell you that if I talk about the growth projection regarding this PFCE, it is projected to be 7%. And when we talk about this private final consumption expenditure as a percentage of GDP, it is basically 61.5%, right? Which is highest since 2012. Now this is very important because this private final consumption expenditure that is there, right, which is nothing. You can understand it like the total money that is spent by the households, right? Total money that has been spent by the households with respect to different goods and services, right? That basically represents the private final consumption expenditure. You can say it is by the private, which is households, and it is a consumption expenditure, the money that has been spent by them in order to purchase different goods and services in very layman format, right? Now this private final consumption expenditure that is there, it is, I would say, a very important indicator of the demand or consumption as a part of the economy. And when this PFC is high, when this PFC is doing good, what does it do? It basically increases the consumer confidence in the market. It basically highlights the rising disposable income as far as the different consumers are concerned, and basically it also highlights sustained household spending, right? And all these things are very important because these things, these parameters, these three parameters that are there, they basically make the consumption a key driver with respect to the current economic growth, right? And as I told you, economic survey also says the same, that how these demand side drivers, they are playing very important role when it comes to this 7.4% real GDP growth that is projected, right? The second factor is investment. Now investments, of course, they have also played very important role. If you talk about the gross fixed capital formation, GFCFs, right, which is directly linked to this investments, it is estimated to be around 30% of the GDP, right? It is estimated to be around 30% of the GDP. And these investments are very important, right? In order to build different forms of infrastructure, these investments are highly important as a part of it, right? In order to build roads, in order to build bridges by the government, right? And this is going to generate employment also. As a part of it, job creation is going to happen, and it is estimated to be around 30% of the GDP. So this is again another push factor that is there when it comes to the high projection that is there with respect to our economic growth, right? Which is the real GDP. So these are the first two factors. The next factor is regarding the export growth. So when I talk about export growth, it has expanded by 5.9%, right? And this basically shows that how the competitiveness of India is increasing, and this basically, I would say, in very simple manner, it somehow it provides the additional support that is required by the GDP, right? And you can see it over here that the export of goods and services as a percentage of GDP is 21.2%, right? This is something that we can see as a part of this data, right? These advanced estimates. So this is again another important factor that shows basically the trend in the domestic economy, and it is also acting as a pushing factor with respect to the economic growth. The next one is basically the supply side factors. So we have seen the important demand side factors that are there. Now the next one is the supply side factors. And as a part of the supply side factors, the first one is basically the service sector. Now service sector, we know that India is one of the largest service providers at the global level, right? And if you talk about the growth projection also, it is good, right? It is 9.1%, and it shows that how service sector plays a very important role as a part of our economic growth, right? Now, if you talk about the second one is the industrial sector, where the growth projection is lower, 6.2%. But even if the overall industrial sector's growth projection is low, but as a part of this industrial sector, if I talk about the manufacturing sector, it has been expanded by 8.4%. Right now, this 8.4% is very important because basically this shows that how the manufacturing sector has been improving if we compare it with the past. And it is very important because if we talk about this manufacturing sector, if we talk about these industries, they are basically required for job creation, right? They are also required for, I would say, in order to reduce the import dependency that is there with respect to a country, right? And basically it also ensures the long term macroeconomic stability. Macroeconomic stability as a part of economic growth, right? So that is why it is very important, and it is projected to be 6.2% as a part of economic growth. The third is the agriculture elite services, which is estimated to grow by 3.1%. Now, I want to discuss it in a detailed manner, but I'm not doing it right now. I'm going to do it when I will take a separate session on agriculture sector, because it is going to be important for the NABARD students, right? So for that purpose, I'm leaving it right now. I will discuss it in a detailed manner, that what is the status of the agriculture sector when it comes to the economic growth, right? We will see it later on. The next is the mining. Now, if you talk about mining, you can see that mining has contracted by 1.8%. Why is it so? Mainly because of the disruptions that have been created because of the excessive rainfall, right? Because due to the excessive rainfall, what basically happens, the water flows into the mine sites, right? Apart from that, there are safety concerns also that are there with respect to the workers, right? So because of that, what has happened, the mining has contracted by 1.8%, right? So we can see the challenges over here. So these are a different type of, I would say, factors that are there that basically shows the trend in the domestic economy, that is in context to India, and they basically highlight the state of the Indian economy, right? And the projection that we have done with respect to real GDP of 7.4%. I hope it is clear. Now let us talk about some other aspects also. Now, as a part of this economic survey, the economic survey also talks about this Reform Express. It says that how the reform momentum is expected to push India's potential of GDP growth to around 7%. Now, what type of different reforms that are there that the economic survey is expecting to push India's GDP to around 7%? Basically, the economic survey, if you will see the last table as a part of this first chapter, it basically highlights the three important parameters, right? I've taken this snapshot from the economic survey only. So the first factor is basically capital accumulation, right? Which is nothing. Capital accumulation basically means building physical capacity. Building physical capacity. Now, as a part of this, I would say, capital accumulation, the economic survey talks about, first of all, the sustained capital expenditure. That is nothing but, I would say, building roads, building bridges, building highways, all such sort of things, right? Which is of course going to play a very important contributory role. Then we have private investment revival also, right? It can be with respect to, I would say, so that we can promote more contribution of private sector as a part of a GDP, for example, by enabling them to open more factories. It can also be related to, I would say, to provide them incentives so that basically they can buy more machineries. Apart from that, basically, it is also going to help them to expand their operations, right? And overall, what it is going to do, it is going to help us to expand our, or I would say, to promote our gross fixed capital that is there, right? So this is something that is very important. The next is the logistic reforms as a part of the capital accumulation. When I say logistic reforms, I'm basically talking about the time that is required basically to transport, right? And also, I would say, the cost that is required in order to fulfill the logistic objectives, right? So it is very important that basically, as a part of this capital accumulation, and in order to harness this, in order to, I would say, promote this or push this India's GDP potential, we basically need to reduce this time as well as this cost of transportation, right? Which is going to be a part of the logistic reforms that is there. Apart from that, the labor input also, it is going to play a very important role. And over here, the economic survey talks about greater formalization, right? When I say greater formalization, we know that basically majority of the labors that are there as a part of our country, they are there in the unorganized sector. But we want to promote more of the organized sector employment, so that basically these labors that are there, they can get better wages, right? Apart from that, they are also going to get social security benefits. Social security benefits are going to be there, and overall it is going to enhance the productivity of their working, right? So this is what we want to shift to, from the unorganized sector to the organized sector, that is promoting more formalization. Then basically there should be better implementation of the labor codes also, right? That will make it easier for the businesses to hire different type of workers. right? Apart from that, it is going to safeguard the workers' rights also, right? Because we know as a part of the labor codes how their rights have been protected. So that is going to be the application of that. Then the third is regarding skilling and employability. You will be surprised to know that basically only 4.9%, only 4.9% of the youth that is aged between 15 to 29, they have basically skill training formal skill training. So this basically indicates the huge mismatch that is there. Only 4.9% of the youth that is aged between the age of that is aged between 15 to 29, they have this formal skill training, which basically highlights the huge mismatch that is there with respect to the skill development. So that basically also has to be taken into accountability when it comes to the labor input, right? And it is again, this is going to give a huge momentum when it comes to the India's potential GDP to around 7%, right? As I told you, it is projected to be 7.4%. This is what we want to do, and these are the areas where we want to focus upon. The third is regarding total factor productivity. Now, when we talk about total factor productivity basically means that how smartly we are able to use the labor and I would say the capital, right? How smartly we are able to do that. So in order to basically fix it, what reforms are required? We need reforms with respect to digital public infrastructure, for example UPI, for example Aadhaar, right? For example digital documentation. All such sort of things are needed to be pushed, right? Why is it so? So that basically it can reduce the transaction costs that are there. It can basically eliminate the middlemen also, right? Apart from that, basically that's how it is going to increase the productivity, by reducing the administrative frictions that are there, right? The second can be regulatory simplification, that is of course to promote ease of doing business. That is going to promote ease of doing business as a part of it. And the third is of course the efficiency gains, right? So which is going to be there. And apart from that, the economic survey also talks about, I would say, that technological adoption also. For example, I would say integrating AI, integrating automation, right? Apart from that, I will say the data analytics that is there, right? So that basically the business operations can be made more efficient. So this is something that we require to do when it comes to the total factor productivity. I hope this is also clear to you. And these things are very easy to understand. I would say what you can do, you can supplement these things with the different type of schemes that have been launched by the government, or if any such sort of other data that you are getting, right? For example, if the government has launched Pradhan Mantri Gati Shakti Yojana, right? So you can write that Gati Shakti Yojana as a part of sustained capital expenditure that is there. तो यहाँ पर आप वो एग्जाम्पल लिख सकते हो. फॉर एग्जाम्पल इन द प्राइवेट इन्वेस्टमेंट रिवाइवल यू कैन टॉक अबाउट viability gap funding scheme. So that's how you can, I would say, integrate your value addition information in the form of schemes, or maybe in the form of data, or in the form of, I would say, facts, right? In order to substantiate your arguments, right? You can talk about labor codes. You can write the name of those important labor codes that are there, right? So that basically you can add the value. So that's how you can write it. So this is the second part of the body that we had discussed, right? Now let us move on to the next part, and this is something that you are going to cover as a part of the second question that I gave you, which is regarding, I would say, let me read the question. The second question that I gave you, which is regarding the global economic landscape, that the global economic landscape is increasingly characterized by fragility, diverging macroeconomic policies, and the rapid resurgence of economic statecraft, right? We will talk about it. Discuss the key vulnerabilities. So this is something that is going to this is something that we are going to discuss now, right? We are done with this question number 1, where we have seen the demand and the supply side factors, and we have also covered the structural reforms that are there. We have discussed it in a detailed manner, and I have told you how you can supplement it using the value added information. Now let us move on to question number 2. Let us discuss these parameters. So when I talk about economic survey, the economic survey has said that if you talk about the global economic growth, it has become more fragile, and I would say up to a huge extent it has become uneven. Now regarding this, the economic survey discusses different type of parameters, different type of areas that it discusses. And the first area is regarding US tariff measures. Now you must be remembering, right, in the April 2025, what happens? What basically happened? There were, I would say, reciprocal tariff. Let me write it over here. Reciprocal tariff with respect to US, right? Now the point is that basically what economic survey says is very interesting when it comes to, I would say, the global economic growth. Please remember, we are talking about the global economy. We are done with the domestic trend, right? So we are talking about the global perspective. So it says that basically when these reciprocal tariffs were announced by the US, At that point of time, basically, what the different countries, different businesses, and different economies, what they were expecting that basically it is going to lower the global growth, and what it is going to do, it is also going to increase the inflation. But surprisingly, what happened, even if these challenges were there, but these challenges were there for the short period only. They were for the transient period only. Why is it so? Why it was there for the short run only? It was essentially because of, I would say, the major trade agreements that was signed by US with different economies, right? We are talking about the American economy right now, right? That is something that we are discussing, that we were expecting that the global economic growth is going to get suffered, the inflation is going to be high. But why it was there for the short run only? Why the impact was not very, very massive? It was basically because of, I would say, the different trade agreements that was signed, right? That basically reduced the overall effective tariff rate that was there. Apart from that, basically, there were different type of steps that were taken by the businessmen also. What happened basically, you know that these tariffs that were there, they were not announced instantaneously, right? Because I would say there was a time frame between the time when the tariffs were announced, right, and the time basically when they came into effect. Now between this time, what basically happened, what different businessmen did, different businessmen, they basically rushed to ship, and they basically sell their goods as many as possible, right, before this deadline, before these tariffs could come into action. And because of this, what basically happened, it basically led to the front loading of exports, right? And for example, I would say the US households that were there, the US businesses that were there, they basically increased their spending. They started buying new and new things because they knew that the tariff is going to get higher, right? So that was also one of the important factors, and that basically slowed down the effect of these tariffs, right? So that is the first thing. That is the first type of concern that is addressed as a part of this. The second is regarding China, right? But yes, let me also put some light upon the challenge that is there. This is something that was a short-term impact that was there. But despite these things, I would say there are still challenges with respect to the US economy because the inflation is still high, right? As a part of it. If we talk about the advanced economic challenges, right? It is saying that basically with respect to advanced economy, that there are two type of challenges that are there. These advanced economies, it includes the US also, that I've just discussed with you. Over here also, I would say the inflation is high, and I would say unemployment is also a very important challenge, right? Even if I would say, if you talk about the economies like US, right, over here the growth is still stable. Why the growth is still stable? Because of, I would say, the investments that have been done with respect to AI and the IT sector, right, the information technology. Because of this, I would say the GDP is surprisingly strong, right? But the point is that along with this, right, I would say high GDP, there are different challenges also, which is, for example, the inflation is high. For example, the unemployment is high as a part of it. So these are the challenges that are there as a part of these advanced economies. The next is China's deflationary pressure. Now, if you see it over here, if you try to draw some comparison with respect to US, what is the scenario? It is witnessing high inflation. But when you talk about China, it is witnessing the problem of deflation. Now, why the deflationary pressure is there when it comes to China? It is mainly because of, first of all, the ongoing crises that are there in China, right? And also because of the tariff wars. And apart from that, I would say the headwinds or the challenges that are there in the property sector in the China. And because of this, what happened? The deflationary challenges are there as a part of the China, right? Now, if you try to merge these 2 points, right? If you try to merge these points, that is, on one side, we have countries like US, which are witnessing inflation. On one side, we have major economy like China, which is suffering deflation, right? Now, don't you think in order to solve these challenges, when the different countries, they are going to implement the monetary policies are also going to get implemented in a divergent manner, right? Somewhere the interest rate would be increasing, and in other countries, what could happen? The countries like China, there could be variation, there could be divergence with respect to the interest rates, right? And this is something that is highlighted, another factor when it comes to the fragility and when it comes to unevenness with respect to the economic growth, with respect to different economies, right? So that is another important point. Now, the next point is basically, and because of this unevenness, what basically happens, of course, it is going to impact the global capital outflows as a part of it, right? This is going to be another impact of that. Now, the next thing that it talks about is basically expansionary fiscal policy. Now if we talk about the different countries, right, because of the high inflation, because of, I would say, the different type of challenges, they are doing more and more expenditure, right? So their fiscal spending has got increased, right? Now as a part of the fiscal spending, I would say one very important factor that has been discussed as a part of the economic survey is basically regarding the primary deficit. It says that if we talk about the different major economies, the primary deficit basically it is increasing, right? We know about primary deficit, which is nothing but the difference between fiscal deficit and the interest payments, right? This is nothing but the primary deficit. So if we talk about primary deficit, it is increasing in the different economies. But I would say the economic survey highlights two very important exceptions, and these two important exceptions are basically Brazil and India, right? Now if we talk about this statement, let I pasted it for you. This is what the economic survey says. It says that the amidst, in the middle of the ongoing weakness in the growth and inflation, fiscal policies in major economies stays expansionary, while the projected primary deficits for the 2025 are generally smaller than the record deficit of 2022-2021, right? When substantial stimulus were used to address the pandemic impact, they are still higher than the pre-pandemic level, except in Brazil and China. So this is something that is the exception that is there with respect to the Brazil and China, right? So if it is basically saying that the primary deficit, right, it has increased as compared to the pre-pandemic period, right? And but the exception to that is the Brazil and China. And why the Brazil and China are, I would say, are exception? Because the economic survey says that if we talk about India's growth is basically less impacted by the external factors, and it is more driven by the internal demand that is there. As I told you, the demand side factors, also sort of things that are there, right? So this is something is the major important push that is there in context to India, and that is why the Indian economy, because of this global fragmentation, it has been lesser impacted as compared to the major advanced economies. So this is what it says. Now the next point is regarding economic statecraft. Now what do you mean by this term economic statecraft? This has been very, I would say, importantly elaborated as a part of the economic survey. Economic statecraft basically means the use of, you can say, the use of economic policies, or you can say economic means in order to achieve strategic ends, or you can say strategic objectives, right? Now how does it happen? Let me give you an example, right? See, in the normal economy, what happens? In the normal economic policy, what happens? The government uses economic policy, for example monetary policy, for example fiscal policy, in order to achieve different type of domestic goals. What can be those domestic goals? For example, there can be inflation, right? In order to I would say decrease the deficits of the government. Also sort of things what the government does, it basically plays around this monetary policy and the fiscal policy as a part of it. But when I talk about the economic statecraft basically means that we are using these economic policies, different type of economic tools, in order to meet strategic ends, right? When I say strategic ends, it can be primarily with respect to foreign policy, it can be, or you can say it can be with respect to the national objectives or national security objectives as a part of it. For example, if I talk about US, what US does basically, it basically utilizes its economic tools, right, in order to restrict Russia's economic growth, right? This is what the US is using, different type of economic tools, so that basically it can restrict the growth and development of Russia, right? So that basically the strategic ends, they can be met. And this is something that we call as the economic statecraft, right? So you can see from the term only statecraft, the craft of state through the economic tools in order to meet strategic objectives, right? Now if we talk about economic survey, the economic survey says that this statecraft is re-rising, right? This not spacecraft but statecraft, we are witnessing this rapid resurgence with respect to statecraft. And why is it so? Why we are witnessing the resurgence of the economic statecraft? It is primarily because of the ultranationalism in different countries. Apart from that, the inward looking policies that are there with respect to different countries, for example USA, right? The inward looking policies that are there, right? So this is something has led to this economic statecraft situation, and this is another important factor that basically highlights the fragility and unevenness when it comes to the global economic growth, right? So these are the different factors that are there. You just need to have a brief understanding regarding these factors, and you can write it in your own words, right? Don't try to make separate notes regarding them. Just try to have understanding, and either you can write it as a part of your answer, or you can use it in order to do value addition in other type of answers, right? But you can just keep it as at the back of your mind. Now let us see the conclusion with respect to the answer. So a short conclusion that India's growth narrative for fiscal year, for financial year 26 is heavily insulated from global shock due to a reliance on domestic consumption and capital formation, right? And that is the reason. That is the reason I told you over here. This expansionary fiscal stance with respect to India, right, where India has shown lesser variance as compared to the other economies. This is the primary reason, right? This is the primary reason because of the resilience that is there with respect to the domestic consumption and the domestic capital formation, right? And by continuously improving capital, labor, and total productivity, what the economy can do, it can successfully shift its baseline growth frontier upwards. So this is something that you can write as a part of the conclusion. Of course, you can write it in your own words. Now this is the homework that you have to write as a part of the comment box. And this is question number 2 for your practice. The answer to this question we have already discussed over here. This flow chart is nothing, this mind map is nothing but the answer to this question number 2, right? And rest of the content is for the question number 1. So that's how you can approach it, and that is all about chapter 1 of economic survey. Now if let me see the chat box. Yes, good evening Ravi. All right, so now I'm ending the session.